Did you know that student achievement and family engagement are related? Welcome to our listeners in the North, South, East, and West. We are Educa K16 podcast, bringing distinguished guests with a wealth of knowledge and expertise to cultivate curiosity and provide educational advice and best practices to move the education conversation momentum forward. Stay in the now and listen to Educa K16. As you see the image on our YouTube channel and listen to us on our podcast, our guest has written an amazing book, Journey to the Future, a holistic roadmap to success for humanity. You can visit www.leadershipleadership.com to purchase her book. Shout out to Jose Carlos from Bottles, our post-production. Without him, we'd be nowhere. To DTO Music, raising the vibration in our planet. And to Arterezone for our creative logo. Welcome to our special guests. Educa K16 started the conversation on Latinos in education with distinguished experts such as Dr. Novoa, who has written 2 books, The Story of Latinos and Education in American History, and Critical Issues of Latinos in Education in 21st Century America. Where are we? You can hear and see our interviews from the prominent educators Dr. Novoa interviewed himself for his research on America's educational challenges. As we distill the books through these interviews, please visit us, go to domasgroup.com, listen and view bios and photos and get involved with these prominent educators. Dr. Novoa, before introducing our distinguished guest, let's chat a minute about the concept of social capital. Introduced in West Virginia, I've been reading your book, right? You know I have been reading it. Introduced in West Virginia by a state supervisor back in 1916. Talk to us about and expand on this concept and the homeschool connection relevancy.
Well, the concept is very simple. It's a matter of who you know and how many people you know and what influence you have through them. Basically, they are your influencers. And so the more you expand that array of people, the more you have influence over your life and influence over your community. It starts with the family, it moves to the community, and then it expands to the rest of the world. So social capital is just another fancy word to say you have connections that have connections, and having connections makes all the difference in the world.
Thank you so much. And now Dr. Novoa Rios will introduce our distinguished guest, retired Lieutenant Colonel Consuelo Castillo Kickbusch, and provide us with all her accolades, please, because I know there are plenty.
It is a pleasure. It is a pleasure in more ways than one. One, because she's a very dear personal friend, but also a very loved person in the stage of impact with others in the field of education, but in the stage of community and family impact with everyday people, everyday families, and at the same time, probably one of the most prominent Latina speakers in the country. In fact, several years ago, she ranked 2nd or 3rd nationwide as the most requested Latina speaker USA. And that's major. So it's an honor for me to be a personal friend of hers, and difficult at the same time for me to be able to present her to an audience, because there's so many accolades I can give and so much I can say that it would take the half hour of this podcast. And so, in brief, she was the highest ranking Hispanic in the military some years back, and retired after some 20 years as lieutenant colonel. in the U.S. Army. From there, it's history all over again in a different way. She is probably the most influential education leader among Latina families across the country. She has spoken in more than 1,000 different school districts nationwide, and at the same time, she is also the president of the organization known as FLI, the Family Leadership Institute. And there is where she does her magic, in the area of parent engagement, which we will be talking about. So it's a pleasure to have her with us.
Thank you, Dr. Novoa, for that amazing introduction. We are Educa K16, if you're just tuning in, and we are having a conversation with retired Lieutenant Colonel Consuelo Castillo Kickbusch, and our focus is parent engagement. She has devoted her life, as I just heard, to empowering families, especially our immigrant families. Again, we will be talking to her about this topic, but you can also visit her website, www.easleadership.com, and go deeper into the Family Literacy Institute.
Thank you.
So, Abdeen, take it away. First question.
Okay. One of the areas that we keep hearing about is the area of basically parent education and leadership development among parents. However, it's an area that is often misunderstood, certainly an area that is not highly valued, unfortunately, and it's an area that there's a lot of controversy about. So the basic question that we all have is, what on earth do we mean by parent education or parent engagement or parent participation in schools? And why do we have to educate parents who already are parents? What do we mean by that? And is this an oxymoronic statement, or what is it? So, basic question to you, Consuelo, is what on earth is parent education all about?
Well, primeramente, first I les doy mi corazón. I give you my heart, because one is to speak truth, and the other is to speak from that first person experience. You know, there's the theoretical, hypothetical, and then there's the practical, realistic point of view. And that's where I'm coming from. And I love you both. Sandra, I feel like I've known you all my life.
Me too, by the way. I love it.
It's un amor. And of course, Abdeen is just something very special to me. But to our listeners, I say the three words that I think often get lost in all of what we're trying to do, and that is love. I love you. And why did I decide that families matter? Because everything that a child brings into a classroom, everything that a person carries as far as baggage, you know, it emanates, it comes from that home. And in that home, it is believed that parents know what they're doing. And in this case, and in my case, I had wonderful parents, but I also lived with family secrets. And parent education is about empowering the family. It is not just about a bake sale. It's not about how to work with the school. It is about dealing with the sense of self, because when a mother, a parent, a guardian is in a good place, they are what you just said, Abdeen, that social capital. Who do they give it to? If a parent's in a good place, if they are moving forward, if they have vision, if they have leadership, if they adapt all of these ideas, then who are they going to influence first? They're going to influence their child. And that child comes in the classroom with this amazing emotional, social, emotional capital, which we call EQ. And if they come with that, then given that they're coming to a school where they are welcome, they are included, then that becomes the IQ. And there can be no greater formula for success than to have a child that comes to the steps of schools with the EQ high, with the school gives them the IQ. Now they can go into life and say, I'm ready for success. So knowing that my own familia, I am the daughter of immigrants. I am the daughter of a mother with mental illness. I'm the daughter of a working class familia. And yes, every morning they woke up and prayed and were thankful, but they didn't know what they didn't know. They were innocently ignorant. And therefore, who then has these conversations without a shame, a blame approach? Who then has these conversations in a safe environment so that parents can become intrinsically aware of their actions, of their behavior, of their past, and how can they break those cycles of whatever it is that they did that was traumatizing, wounding, hurting their children without really knowing the impact it had on. And we see it in the classrooms. We see it when we and you know as Profesora Gonzalez, you know it when our children come and they put their head down and they don't volunteer and they don't see their self-worth. But we have to first build the parent up. We have to first help the parent to heal so that environment, that culture at home is de que sí se puede. Yes, you can. And
so something you're saying, and I know that I hate to interrupt you,
No,
but
no,
it
that's
just
fine.
brought chills to my body because of memories. I taught K-12.
Yeah.
I taught kindergarten through fifth grade for a long time, and it's a big difference. What you said is key. It's a big difference. A teacher needs to welcome the child.
Yes.
But if the child feels inadequate in the classroom because of his IQ, because he's not learning or whatever, if you welcome the parents, the mother, welcome her through that threshold, you open up a whole different world for that child, right?
Yes,
He belongs.
it becomes the pathway to freedom. You know, as a soldier, I served our country for 20 years. And the idea, my basis for serving was that I am passionate about democracy. But there's no greater democracy in anybody's land until you're educated. That is the only real concrete form of democracy, is when you are educated, then you're free to have your personal will and to decide for yourself. But when you are labeled, when my father had to sign with an X because he was functionally illiterate, it branded him for life. But he had a greater vision than himself. And that was that his children would be part of that American dream, which is why of the 10 of us, 8 of us are veterans. So there can never be a question sometimes about how much we give to the country, how much have we earned in the country. The idea is that it's families, and that's why I'm passionate about immigrant families, is we have done every job in the nation, and we have done it to the best of our ability, and we're not asking for anything more than what is social justice, and that is access, equity in the classroom. My duty, my passion, as my brother Abdin has witnessed me doing, is to go to the grassroots and work with school districts that are visionary, school districts that get it, that social capital starts at home. And we sit there with our familias and we start from a point of where they are. Our parents have a PhD in life. This is not about portraying them as missing, lacking. That's a deficit model. I'm talking about building from where they're at, recognizing that what they do with so little, very few CEOs could even do it. Recognizing that the means by which they came, not knowing a language, finding out where to live, how to feed their children, all of these are critical thinking skills that any senior leader in corporate America would just want to come in the door. People that are innovative, people that are creative, and so our community possesses all of these skills. What we need to allow and support is to look upon parents as partners and look upon their wisdom and their knowledge, and then give them the part that they're naive about. Add that component.
I love what you're saying,
Okay.
and my question then is, how do we make that happen? How does that occur? How do you, as a parent whisperer, if I may say, how do you get parents to climb that ladder of success and empowerment?
What I decided early on, and I've been doing this for 25 years, more than 1 million children and their parents, is I started to tell my story, and that can be a whole other podcast altogether. But when I told my story, many parents that were in the audience came and said, "That's my story, but I'm still in a place of confusion. I still yell at my kids, like you talked about. I still feel like I'm not doing the best I can because I'm wounded." So I created the Family Leadership Institute. And the Family Leadership Institute is the only institute in the nation that can bring a superintendent, a school board member, a teacher, a principal, and a parent all together under one roof. All titles get left at the door. And everyone comes together to build community, because at the center of all that we learn at the Institute is that it's about our children. So what happens often is we get superintendents who come and say, "Oh, I'm just here to support parents." Then they discover a lot of their own childhood trauma. They discover a lot of their own journey. And now they get rid of that title and they're talking first person. And then the parents get to see the educators as these human beings that also had a story. So the Institute is a 10-module approach that begins with your own story. It talks about the impact of your behavior on families and children. It talks about the educational system. It talks about visioning, thinking out, which then the parents, everybody makes vision boards. And then we celebrate. And now here's a beautiful thing. The question people ask me is, well, how do you measure? How did all that come into the classroom? I need to know that we're spending all this money, and I want to know that grades are going up. I want to know that kids are coming back to school. Well, that's where I am so honored to have a national researcher like Abdeen, that I didn't say anything about the Institute. I said, come, sit in the back of the classroom and put on your researcher hat and see what is happening in this institute. And then he came back 4 years later and looked in the eyes of these families that had graduated and was able to see the huge impact and changes, not just academic, but emotional changes. Parents end up going back to school. They end up opening businesses. They end up, and what community in their planet doesn't want that? What community doesn't want healing and restoration and social justice if we don't say that families matter first?
And that's exactly like the entire world is
Right.
in that right now. It's not just the
Ex-
U.S. I mean,
Exactly.
the entire world is looking at diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging,
And
right?
belonging. That's
So,
it.
yeah. So we are Educa K16. If you just tuned in, our guest is quoted in Dr. Novoa's book, Critical Issues of Latinos in Education in the 21st Century. She is quoted by saying, schools must be places that welcome children and their parents. Families are fully validated when they are appropriately welcomed at school. If you just tuned in, listeners, we're talking with a leading expert on bolstering the parent-school connection, parent engagement. So, Consuelo, we have learned that schools should be organized holistically, internally, to bring parents in. But can you dive a little bit deeper? What are your recommendations? How would this work? What can schools do to enhance parent education, parent engagement?
Well, the very first thing is to recognize that the traditional approach does not bring you the results. That's this idea of putting the flyer, you know, picking hours that are convenient for the school, not for the community. This idea that we're going to talk to you, that it's a one-way methodology. These are not respectful to our community. We need to then meet with the local leaders, 2 or 3 grassroots leaders, the doñas, the dons of our community. And they're the ones to tell you, to look you in the face and say, why would you want me to come during my working hours when I already need extra hours? Why do you want to then come and give me everything in English? And I got here 6 months ago, and you fill in my bag with all these things, and I know you have good intentions, but what do I do with all this? And so the idea then is to start small, but go deep. Start small with a group of parents, earn their trust, and then elevate the dual conversation. Help us to help the community. Help us, not the hierarchical attitude that, I'm the principal and what I say is what goes, but rather that a principal accesses the community, not, the teachers do home visits, they work with the local faith-based organizations, they work with the Latino chambers of commerces, because you know what? This is an economic issue. This is not just a feel good, we're nice to each other, let's go. This is about a workforce development issue. And if we are still discussing dropout rates in 2021, which was part of the Hispanic Excellence Research Project 50 years ago, something's not working. So we need to then push ourselves, the whole community, to say, look, we're going to be respectful. We're going to listen to the community, to what are their real needs. When I think of a school in New Mexico that created a satellite campus on their campus from the local community college, all of a sudden their enrollment went up 300%. Is that not part of workforce development?
That's awesome. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Okay.
So you're bringing a whole concept of community-based schools.
Absolutely.
Because you're looking at children in elementary schools, K-12, let's say, all the whole gamut, right?
Right.
And we have all these issues. We have dropout issues. We have absenteeism.
Yes.
We have bullying. We have vandalism. We have gang issues. I mean, there are a lot of issues
You
in
name
school.
it. Yes.
So how can you bridge for us, like, how creating these community-based schools by starting small, because I heard you, that was key, start small, go deep, earn the trust of the stakeholders, of the parents. So where is that bridge to create those community-based schools? How does that help those issues of absenteeism, of bullying, of vandalism?
When we come to the Institute, one of the very first things that we do, without shame, without blame, remember, is that awareness of the parent's behavior. The why do you do what you do, which wounds the children, which gives the children a feeling that they need to go outside the home to belong, whether it's a gang or early marriage or whatever it is. When we can do it in a small and you go deep, then you have the parent emerge from their own awareness to changing behavior. And when they begin to have that heart-to-heart conversations with love, with understanding, the child automatically begins to change their behavior because they recognize that that their home is whole, that they are loving each other, that they're even dealing with difficult issues with respect, with support. Then the child comes into the classroom. Now we encourage the parents to meet with the teachers, not to threaten them, not to make it a us versus them, but to say, I am Maria's parent. I want the best for Maria. What can I do? Then the teacher begins to acknowledge, oh, the parent is here. Oh, they're coming back again. Now you've got everybody highly sensitized that they are in a relationship. And that relationship is what gets academic success to naturally evolve. Porque todos estamos en la misma página. We're all on the same page. So when the teacher...
quick question to you, Consuelo. So, we have listeners that are parents, students, we have policymakers. I mean, we might have principals listening to us right now. So, do you work with schools directly? Do they have to come to you? How do they tap into your services?
Well, we started doing it school district by school district, because we've never advertised. What happened then is it got to be a really big need. And so we decided to do a national training conference, which we do in Las Vegas. We then, because of the pandemic, we are now going to do a national training conference, virtual, in April. And if they go to our website, they will have all of the information to register. We're going to launch our very first post-pandemic conference in July in Las Vegas. Yes, some of us live here and we do work here. and so we welcome our listeners to send their change agents to come to this conference because it's a train the trainer. There we get to first work on you. I don't care what you are, administrator, whatever. You are a person that we love. And there for 4 days, 3 days during Las Vegas, we work on you. And then we give you the curriculum. At that point, you are now a trainer, but you also experienced it, like Abdin did in Coachella Valley. Then you take this knowledge, this transformation, you take it back to your community. Now, sometimes superintendents go through it. You're going to see on the documentary. We had a superintendent who said, I've never cried so much in my life. And he's willing to be vulnerable because he's an honorable man. And he knew now that everything that his school district was doing in terms of parent engagement wasn't working. He realized then that the model did not meet the needs of his community. He had a very high ELL community, a very high immigrant community, migrant. So he realized for himself, we can't stay on the surface just for the dog and pony show. We can't just have a clown to come entertain the parents. We need to go small and we need to go deep. Then that small group emerges in the community as the change agents. They end up bringing 200 parents, 500 parents. And now a school district is fully empowered. Now they're acting as a community. And the grades, the behavioral, all of the things that you mentioned, Sandra, they take care of themselves.
Right.
instead
Right.
of
No,
top
it's a
down.
holistic approach, definitely.
Yeah.
So I want to read from Dr. Novoa's book.
Okay.
He writes, the achievement gap seems to come up in every other discussion about American education nowadays. It is a topic that haunts the new millennium as it also makes educators nervous. It is not only an embarrassing condition, but the most stringing evidence that education is not working well, including the ballyhoo about school reform. Dr. Noboa, I turn the conversation to you and say, how you talk about this gap in student achievement and looking at family engagement, parent engagement. Is that a bridge to closing that gap?
The best bridge that there is, unquestionably. Dollar for dollar, the best investment a school district can make is the investment on the parent. Why? Because one parent does not just impact one child, it impacts multiple children. And parents also impact all other parents much more than a teacher or a school will. So that I found in the research that I did with FLI several years ago, in more than one occasion, that the more the parent got turned on and involved in schooling, the better their child did.
Yeah.
And so there was a direct relationship. And what's interesting is that if you're going to spend a little bit of money, spend that money on the parent, and that parent will take care of that child and help you in the educational process.
Absolutely.
We don't think that way.
No.
And we also see parents sometimes against school teachers. And the two, ironically, are working for the best, as best they can, for the same child, and yet they're not on the same page. So I see the FLI being the connector that is missing greatly in our school system, and effectively more than anything I have seen in the entire educational K-12 spectrum.
Wow, powerful, very powerful. Consuelo, closing statement. What message do you want to leave our listeners with?
First and foremost, I go back to those words, love. I love our gente. I love our community. My mother loved me. She just didn't know how. I needed to learn to separate the disease from the person. My barrio was with all of those descriptors that you gave earlier. But we're still gente. We're still a people of faith. We're people with ganas. We just need some of the tools to get to that other side. But I would say to all of us listening, especially those of us who finally got those papelitos, not to forget where we came from. And we can never understand where we're going until we have embraced our entire history of our lives, whether it was raised on an island as bella as Puerto Rico or a barrio in Texas. There is always one thing that our families want. They want us to succeed. No parent wakes up giving their children the gift of failure, the gift of you're never going to make it. And so for me, the Institute is the equalizer for school districts that have the heart and the courage to say, what we're doing doesn't work. We need to do it differently. And then they see that our families emerge, that they end up being the change agents. And then they see their children graduate and go on to college. 25 years later, I'm now getting the phone calls from those children that are now in Congress, that are lawyers, that are teachers, that are superintendents. There could be no greater paycheck for me than to know that the Institute was a part of our gente getting to a better place. Que Dios los bendiga. Remember, love.
Love. Love is the key word that permeates through your story, through the Institute, through the books that Dr. Novoa has written. Thank you to our distinguished guest and our co-host and to our listeners. We are Educa K16 podcast and YouTube channel. Stay tuned for next week as we continue to elevate the conversation about parent engagement. Consuelo, I'm going to invite you back right now in front of our listeners because this is too short of a time to just, nip it in the bud and keep moving. We need to dive deeper into parent engagement. We will be back next week with our distinguished guest. Please visit the website and learn about the Institute. We are interested. If you are interested, you can read about it at domasgroup.com. Or you could just go to the YouTube channel or visit Educa K16 podcast. We will have some information there for you as well. Dr. Abdin Novoa, always a pleasure to co-host with you. Thank you. Consuelo, thank you.
Thank you, Consuelo.
Thank you.
Los quiero mucho. Sigan,
All love to you.
sigan en la lucha, ¿eh?
Sí se puede.
Claro. Claro.
Thank you so much.
Gracias.